The last episode had me on the edge of my seat. I was so convinced it was game over for our boy and we gonna have the story end right there. Our boy faced his biggest challenge yet, when that giant bird and the ever-dangerous succubus Mina completely cornered him. But of course our trusty plot armor kicked in just in time, saving him from real harm. Fast forward a bit, just as he was catching his breath, a dungeon appeared in the distance, and off he went to check it out. At that moment, the girls that he saved earlier all turned around and asked, "Wait, you're not dead?" Picking up where we left off, Lin gives them a blank stare, asking them if is it really that shocking he's still alive. The hammer-wielding girl, blushing, admits she even went through the trouble of making him a gravestone. Lin's face darkens, and he has no idea how to respond to that. Meanwhile, Captain Zhang, not far away, spots Lin and rushes over. Lin asks him what's going on here, and Zhang, looking all serious, points behind him, saying that those guys don't want them to enter this dungeon. Lin, realizing it's not the dungeon he was looking for, still raises an eyebrow out of curiosity. Zhang goes on to explain that the dungeon produces something called the Heart of the Earth, which is a legendary item. It turns out that, among all knight professions, becoming an Earth Knight is the ultimate dream, a final class evolution that every knight desires. Captain Jiang recalls how once, a divine-level Earth Knight single-handedly held off 10 demon lords, securing a crucial victory for their human race. But here's the catch. To become an Earth Knight, the most important thing to have is the Heart of the Earth, and it only drops in this particular dungeon, which rarely appears on the upper levels of the Eternal Trials ground. He also mentioned that this item only works for humans. This is why the abyssal demons and dragons go out of their way every time to block the humans from getting inside. Zhang was frustrated looking at the entrance being blocked, but Lin just nodded thoughtfully, while thinking to himself, even though that item might not be useful for him personally, if it helps humanity, then he's going to take it. Up in the sky, the demon spots Lin approaching and bursts out laughing, wondering if they were serious, sending over a level 33 kid. He initially thought it was some sort of reinforcement, but seeing how young Lin was, he figured he'd make a tasty snack instead. In the demons' minds, there was no way the humans could break through and enter the dungeon, but something was bothering the little succubus. She sensed something off. She could sense Lin carried a mark left by a top-level succubus, which could only mean that this guy had been hunted by one of their strongest. But how could he still be alive if that was the case? The rest of the demons overheard this, and suddenly, they weren't so cocky anymore. However, they decided to let the dragons go in first, and then swoop in to pick up the leftovers. Meanwhile, on the other side, the dragons were quite angry. They could sense something familiar on Lin, almost like the cries of their fallen warriors. This caused them to wonder just how many of their kind had Lin killed to give off such a vibe, despite their urge to attack Lin. But the smarter ones in the group pointed out that if Lin had killed so many of their own, he had to be very strong. So, the smart play was to let the demons make the first move and then clean up after. It seemed like both the demons and dragons had the same idea. Lin glanced at both camps, noticing neither side was making a move. Clearly, they were hesitating. Well, if they weren't going to do anything, Lin wasn't about to sit around wasting time. He turned to the hammer girl next to him and casually told her to follow him into the dungeon. The girl blinked, thinking she'd heard him wrong. She even pointed at herself, wondering if it was just the two of them. Lin didn't bother explaining much. He started walking while telling her that two of them were more than enough. Lin had his own reason for picking her, as he believed her collection skill might come in handy later in the dungeon. She was a bit worried, wondering if they'd just go in like this. Won't these guys just attack them? Before she could overthink it, she got the team invite notification. Lin reassured her with a calm grin, telling her to trust him. Lin casually cast skeletal armor on the hammer girl as they approached the dungeon's entrance. Both the demons and dragons watched in confusion, wondering why the other side wasn't making a move. Just as Lin had predicted, neither side dared attack first. And with that, the two of them made it right up to the dungeon entrance and, under everyone's watchful eyes, teleported inside together. The demons turned to the dragons, accusing them of waiting to swoop in after the fight. The dragons stared right back, saying the demons were the untrustworthy ones. Inside the dungeon, they found themselves in a canyon-like environment, lit by the strange glow of the surrounding plants. The girl was looking around with curiosity. This was her first time entering this dungeon, and she was clearly excited. Wasting no time, Lin summoned a bunch of skeletons to scout ahead. Soon, a map formed in his mind. The dungeon wasn't too complicated, although the map looked massive, but it all led to one straight path. But then, one of his skeletons was suddenly attacked. He rushed to the spot and quickly spotted the culprit, a massive python-type monster that had tightly coiled around one of his skeletons. The detection spell revealed it was a level 50 earth serpent. Its attributes weren't particularly high compared to the monsters Lin had faced recently. The girl, eager to prove herself, jumped in with her massive hammer while saying she got this. A few minutes later, she used her collection skill to finish off the serpent, and the system rewarded them both with 1 million experience and 2 earth shards, 1 from the drop and 1 extra from her collection skill. After reading the item description, Lin noticed that he would need to collect 1,000 earth shards to make a complete heart of the earth. As expected, her collection skill was going to be a game changer. Curious, Lin asked how many times she could use the skill at once. She held up 2 fingers while grinning, saying it could go up to 200. After getting the response he was looking for, Lin then devised a plan. He would lure all of the dungeon's monsters into one spot, letting her use her skill on as many as possible in one go. The girl's eyes lit up with excitement, flexing her bicep, getting quite excited. The skeletal warriors sprinted off in all directions, luring out every monster they could find. Soon, the monsters poured in, pythons like the one from before, centipedes emerging from underground, and spiders crawling down the cliffs. In no time, the skeletons had rounded up over 100 monsters. Although excited, actually seeing these monsters all at once, the girl's eyes widened in disbelief. She had never seen something like this before, let alone fought so many at once. Seconds later, Lin cast a slowing curse. Massive red shackles materialized out of nowhere, locking down every single monster and immobilizing them. The skeletons, not ones to waste an opportunity, hit the monsters a few times, and then backed off, giving the girl a last hit. But the real show was just about to start. Now, it was her moment. With a determined grin, she gripped her massive hammer, took a deep breath, and unleashed her mass collection skill.